Morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Morning, sir.
This is Dr. Sar. I'll be on video shortly.
Switch locations on us, Frank.
Yes, how y'all doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm fine, just fine.
Okay, it's 9 o'clock. Trying to see who all is on. Make certain.
Commissioner Sar, you're the one that comes up as iPhone, correct?
This is Jim Glenn. I'm on iPhone also.
Yes, this is Commissioner Sar. I'll be on video here shortly. Switching over.
All right. Thank you. Just wanted to verify that name. It didn't have a name with it.
I'm looking, Terrence. It looks like we're one member short of a quorum right now.
Let me see. I thought I counted 6.
Okay, yeah, we do. We have 6. So with that, let me call this January 20, 2022 meeting of the Kentucky Commission on Human Rights to order. First item of business is a confirmation of quorum and the confirmation of public executive director.
We do have a quorum and notice was sent.
Any requests for public participation?
There's been no request for public participation.
Okay, so the next item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes of the November 18, 2021 meeting. May I have a motion to approve those minutes?
So
Jim
moved.
Glenn, approving the minutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor of the approval of the minutes, I guess raise your hand. Okay. Those opposed, like sign. Hearing none, the minutes are approved. Next item, we move to section reports, is the report from the executive.
Morning, everybody. I will bounce a little bit just because I'm doing host duties and admitting people in as well. So we just had Commissioner Fuentes join us, for example. Wanted to first welcome everybody back. We've been away since November, so it's good to see everybody. I'm sure everybody enjoyed a nice little break doing this with us. But it's good to have everybody back. Um, just really quickly, and I will go very fast. We have a meeting, well, using the Zoom for mediation after this, so I'll try not to hog the bandwidth forever. Just going to budget and personnel. I'm sure you all saw the budgets that came out. The governor's proposed budget, which came out second for the first time, was a really good budget for us. I included it in the book about restoring our $100,300 that was cut in the current budget, and then adding an extra 200,000 to address staffing and all of those things that were shared with them in the communications that I know I've had with them in the past year, and from the presentation I did to the budget committee as well in November. The House budget cuts the office by another 70,000. And so I'll be working hard this session with the legislature to try to go with the governor's proposal, or at least find some way to mix the two, just to find a way to meet in the middle to address that difference, because a $70,000 cut with proposed increases that they're making for state employees is just very, that could be very untenable for our office. And so we're working on getting numbers of exactly what that looks like with any proposed change. But hopefully we'll be able to work through getting at a minimum holding the line, but hopefully getting some of that, what was recommended by Governor Bashir. Another thing on the budget, we've decided that we were going to no longer use the state car that we've had with the agency. We haven't been able to use it very often. We haven't done much traveling and use of it, and just you pay pretty much on an assumption of miles that you would use, and we were paying for miles that we were never using. And so it will be more cost effective to do reimbursements for trips if they're needed. And for the most part, we're not utilizing that either due to COVID, meeting changes, and it just made more financial sense for us right now to forego the car. And then we do have the option to replace it or, bring it back at some other time when it's a little bit more cost effective, when we're doing more community use or traveling more for investigations and that type of thing. So I will circle back when that happens, but for now we are planning to forego that use. I did want to quickly do our staff spotlight. We are welcoming 3 law students for this semester. I think Charles, Emily, and Meredith are on, but I just wanted to welcome them. And then we also have a U of L senior, Alex, who will also be helping out through another program similar to the one run by the law school. And so just wanted to welcome them and invite them to this meeting so they can kind of see what goes on, and just to, say hello and see some of the work that we're doing. So welcome to them. Let's see. For training, I mentioned this in our November meeting that I was going to do an in-depth executive branch ethics commission training as the ethics officer for the commission. There were a lot of pieces of information that I gained in that meeting about policy controls within the office. And so that's something that I'm working on in the next few months, is adopting some of these policies internally and practices that they recommended for an ethics officer to handle. And so some of that was simple, like making sure that we all have an agreement signature verified agreement on some of our internal practices, as opposed to these are the things that just exist, but just acknowledging on a consistent basis that we know these are our working guidelines. And so that way there's more accountability that we can point back to saying, okay, this is what we were working on and this is what we were doing, and being able to refer back to that affirmed practice. There's also been a little bit of EEOC training on how we handle vaccine mandates within workplace discrimination complaints. I followed up with our EEOC manager to put together a more comprehensive training, but this was a few weeks ago, and recent Supreme Court decisions have changed that a little bit. And so I'll be circling back with them on if there's some changes in how we look at those types of cases when they come in. We've also done a lot of HIMSS training, which is our HUD database, to work on our input and management of cases. And we are also going to have an upcoming training on conciliation practices, because HUD is making some changes in how they want us to address conciliating a case. And not just us specifically, but overall, they want to refine how conciliations are done in the housing cases. And so we'll be working with them on that this month and next month whenever that training gets completed, and they'll send us a guideline or practices guide to say this is what we expect to see in these conciliation agreements and how to facilitate them. And then the last piece is a little bit larger. I've been working almost daily with our HUD manager. They identified some practices they want us to look into. And so we're working on quite a few changes on how we handle all of our cases. And I am working with her. I actually have a meeting with her after this meeting to create an overall training on how we could revamp our process. And then after we get done working through it, we'll do internal trainings together, and I'll do some independently on how we can change or shift to the practices that they want to see out of us. And then I've also been working with her on back-end quality control reviews to look at what we're producing up against the standards that HUD is looking for. And so I've been working with her on how we can do that. And she's been giving me resources and training me basically on how to look through some of these cases before we submit them finally for processing. And this will be a little bit more for me to do in looking at these, but it's important that we do that back in QC and looking at how we're working on some of these cases for future practice. And then this will be mitigated by the training that we're doing. And honestly, and this goes back to the budget conversation, the biggest piece that they've reiterated to me is that we need to find more staffing on all fronts with HUD. And so, but we are going to do some training to do the best with what we have. And so that's kind of where we are. There will be a couple changes, but I really hope that we can find some ways to address the staffing piece, because that will really help. And then we've also talked about setting up some fair housing training sessions and conferences for you all as commissioners. There will be more to come on that, but she has shared with me a few options and things that we can start looking into. One of them, I think, is in the fall in Chicago. But as of now, there's the possibility for a virtual option as well. But they are hoping that drops depending on how the pandemic progresses. But that is one of the ones that is up, but we are looking through other options and opportunities for commissioners just to see some of the fair housing training and be introduced a little bit more to that world. So I'll follow up with more on that once it gets a little bit more clear. We have training funds available to help to cover the cost of those types of things. And so we just have to amend our work plan. Oh, actually, it's already approved to the training plan. Yeah, so we could use the training plan funds to cover those types of conferences for you all to attend. As of a few days ago, our EEOC management system changed. We've had a lot of training on the new program, which is called ARC, which is replacing IMS, which was what we were using. It's supposed to be more comprehensive and efficient. And it was, to say the least, a little stressful when they were starting to get it switched over, because they had some email issue that ended up sending, I think at my last count, I got 293 emails from this system being set up. But the hope is that this program will do a little bit more than the past program, and it's just an update all around through the EEOC. We are also working to set up individualized training as it's rolled out. We did some larger scale training, but they were a little bit more difficult to follow. But I do know that the teams here did more training. I'm just referring to what I saw, but they did do more training to get a little bit more hands-on with it. And there's more training upcoming, and we're working on an individualized training, agency specific. Just for some of my other updates, I asked you all in our November meeting to let me know about some policy positions that you were interested in supporting this coming year. Of those who reached out, we talked about some specific items that we're going to either join on or help move forward, including the Crown Act. And if you have any questions about these, I'll be sure I'll answer or explain them a little more at the conclusion. But the Crown Act, expanding LGBTQ protections like we have them right now, the source of income being added in housing, the banning of conversion therapy, and the conducting of racial impact statements in legislation. I'm not sure if we discussed this the last meeting, but we won't be relocating to another building after having staff discussions and preferences. But we are we're going to consolidate to one floor. And we are looking at the remodeling options on how we can best utilize that space, but it will save us quite a bit of money to consolidate to one floor. It's my personal preference anyway, because it's a little bit better for team unity than to have this split floor situation, which I hate. Being blunt, I think it's ridiculous. We have the space to all be on one floor, and that's what we're going to do. I did talk to everyone about what we wanted to do, or what we felt was needed. And so if and when we're staying here, I did put out a list of demands that were driven by staff input for management to improve the conditions of the building. The biggest two were having actual clean bathrooms and having consistent elevator use. We all know a few years ago when they stopped working forever, and then most recently we've had them stop intermittently off and on the past 2 months for a day or two, and it's not great. It's been a little bit easier because we're not all in the office at once right now. Due to Omicron, we're back to our staggered scheduling, making sure that we're not having too much overlap in the building, especially with the extreme transmissibility. It just didn't seem appropriate to have everyone in at the same time. So we're working on getting those demands put into any type of renegotiated lease agreement for our consolidated floor. I did do and post the Hanukkah lighting video with Commissioner Rabbi. And he had probably too many lighting ceremonies going on at the time. I think he was, I can't remember how many he said, but I think he had like 40 in 2 weeks. But he did make the time, and we did do a video, which is on our social media if anyone wanted to check it out. I was hoping he'd be here to make fun of me, but I had to edit the video pretty hard because I never really have used a lighter. And so I had a couple incidents, we'll say, with trying to light the menorah. So clearly not a smoker. I'm used to the long ones to light like a grill or something. So I almost burned my thumb off, and then I couldn't get it to spark. So that was fun. And it was a great video. So anyone who wanted to see it, it was on our social media. I worked with Commissioner Worth around some of his hopes for the commission and policies that he was really hoping that we could support or push for. And he asked how he could use his voice as a commissioner to uplift issues. And so I did want to reiterate that commitment or that request of anyone here. If anyone has something that they feel, a position or an issue that you feel passionate about, that you want to use the commission as a platform to advance that issue in human rights, please reach out to me, and we can work on how we can, make that happen, because that is a unique position to be in, that you are a commissioner and you can use that and say, like I know Commissioner Worth was very, very passionate about some of the issues that I mentioned earlier. And so he asked me specifically, how can I, as a commissioner, use the name and my position to uplift this issue a little bit more. And so that's what we've been working through and talking about. And that, again, that opportunity is afforded to all of you. And I would be happy to move forward on whatever you feel is something that we should work on. And then another smaller update that was not in this, but I thought about it as I drove in. It slipped my mind because as I said, we've been on that staggered schedule. I haven't really been in this physical building in a while. But we also made there was a parking change. Our parking service provider, they were bought out. And so the parking at the building, this will become more relevant when we return to in-person meetings. I will continue to say when and not if, but when we return to in-person meetings, the parking in the building, it's now pay by plate instead of the tags that we had. And so there's a pay by plate option, and then we obviously would cover or reimburse for when you're here, but it's not the same tags that we used to have, and there's not the pay at the gate thing anymore. We also have secured 2 spots in the building parking. And so if someone wanted to come down for a meeting, just let me know. And then I can just meet you with a parking space pass for our actual building parking, the spaces that are owned by the building. And so when we're having, let's say one of you wanted to come down and have a meeting with me, I just be able to give you that pass. So those are just 2 changes. They're small, but like I said, I didn't think about them until I drove in, since I haven't seen this place very much. And then lastly, I reached out to some of you after speaking with the chair about the return of the Hall of Fame. And so I've been working on creating a streamlined online portal for the website where people can nominate whomever, whatever individuals for selection. And then I will work with the interested commissioners in Marianne to make the determinations before any awards are planned. This was a great idea that Commissioner Rabbi made that I wanted to share as we closed up, because in our meeting talking about Hanukkah and talking about bringing light, he said to me that it became apparent to him that we have so much darkness in the world right now, and that we're in need of a little light. And he said that the Hall of Fame could be a little light. And so that perspective is something I wanted to share as something that I wanted to drive us, that as this commission moves forward, that I hope that we can continue to be the light. And so I just wanted to share that because I thought that was a great way for him to put it when we were talking about it. And any questions?
Any questions for Terrence from any of the commissioners? Okay. Terrence, I got a comment and then a question. The first one was, we talked, I think at one of the previous meetings, about having the executive director for Lexington Housing come and present to us. You know, given what you said about the training that HUD wanted the commissioners to have, I think it may be good if we go forward with meeting with Lexington Fair Housing, that occur after that meeting with HUD, so we're able, all of us are better informed in regards to what the HUD requirements and regulations are, so we can have an informed discussion with him. So that's just a comment. The second one, on the consolidation all to one floor, will there be sufficient space to accommodate the current staff and potentially say future expansion back to the level we were prior to all these cuts?
So that is a great question. We will have the space. We are putting together a memo that has to go through Real Properties to talk about what the changes would be, really drawing out the layout again. I did a quick rough draft of a layout, which did leave some space for some extra offices, but the way the space is set up, there would still be sufficient space for increased levels. What we'll do is, after the memo is prepared and when Real Properties is working through what changes would need to be made, we would also add potential staffing numbers in the space request. And so they would base how the build out is constructed on that space request. And it's done through a formula of whatever size the offices are supposed to be. It's all, but we would have enough space on that floor. And if we don't, then I don't need an office. I'll give it up. But I think it will sufficiently fit on that same floor. It's just really a matter of how do we design some of the things, even if we needed to add something in the middle where it's open space right now, building out some new walls and that type of thing is what we're working with. We'll work with Real Properties on figuring out how to best fit.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Any other question from any other commissioners? Commissioner Fuentes?
Yes, just a quick comment. A couple of months ago, we had a resolution regarding Cuba and the Cuban community here in Kentucky. And I want to express my gratitude to all the commissioners, especially to you, Mr. Burrs and Mr. Sullivan. I just learned last week that the resolution 36 was adopted by the Senate. So again, on behalf of 30,000 Cubans living here in Kentucky, I want to say thank you very much. It is a resolution about the human rights in Cuba. So again, on behalf of my community, I want to say thank you to everybody who supported this resolution. Appreciate that.
Thank you for those comments, and was glad that we were able to be helpful. And I guess going back to part of what Terrence said in his report about policy issues or matters in which this commission ought to take a stand, we're in need of and want to have many more items to us to comment on, advocate for, and advance the mission of this organization. So thank you for that opportunity. Any other questions in the commissioners? Hearing none, let's move to the budget and personnel report from Brandon.
Sorry, I'm not on video, but I am currently riddled with COVID. So you have my report before you. If there are any questions, I will field them at this time.
Okay, you had his report in the package that was sent out, the book. Are there any questions about any of the items in the budget and finance report? Okay, hearing none, then let's move to the enforcement unit report from Aaron Spalding. Aaron?
Hello, everyone. You have my report and you have the CRCs and the case list. If you have any questions, just let me know.
Any questions from any of the commissioners on the case recommendation? Okay, hearing none, can I have a motion to approve and accept the case recommendations from the staff?
Commissioner Burst, I do have one. Well, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
We have 3 pulls this morning on the case index. I forgot all about those. We have 2 conciliations that are being pulled, and that is, let me pull up the KCHR numbers. That is KCHR number 2063-H with a HUD number 04-19-9511-8. And that is Bullen versus Mount Vernon Heights. It's a conciliation. It is being pulled. We also have conciliation case number 1871-H, and that's HUD number 04-16-4847-8, and that's Young versus Roxanne Hill. And then we also have a withdrawal with settlement that is being pulled, and that is case number 2145-H with a HUD number 04-21-7052-8, and that's Aki versus Housing Now Flagey. And those 3 cases are being pulled.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the recommendations with those pulled from what was provided to us?
So moved.
But moved by Commissioner Henry. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, there's a second. Any further discussion on the recommendations? Hearing none in favor, you could, all those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, any opposed? Okay, those in fact are approved. Anything else from you, Aaron?
Nope, thank you.
Okay, so we now move to the section, and the one up is education and outreach. Mary Ann.
Good morning. Mary Ann is actually driving right now, but she is listening to the meeting. She's asked that if you have any questions about her report, that you put it in the chat and that she will get back with you.
Okay. So if you, as asked, commissioners, if there are any questions you may have, you can put them in the chat and she'll get a response back from her as to relates to education outreach items. In the report, in the material that was in the report, there any questions from any of the commission? Okay, hearing none, we'll next move to the legal unit report and Terrence report.
So you all have the legal unit report of the cases that are currently with legal. If there are any questions, I will do my best to answer them or get back to you very quickly with a response.
Any questions? Okay, hearing none, we'll then move on to committee reports or items that we're working on. And I guess you were circulated the Kentucky Commission Human Rights Community Fund Policy, really for discussion and comment if you have any. Terrence, why don't you introduce that, and then we can take any comments the commissioners may have.
Sure. And do you think do you want me to share it, or I can just talk about it?
Just talk about
Okay.
it. You did out to everybody. Everybody got it, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So as we discussed in our last meeting, when we spoke about the adoption of a community fund agreement on how we could safely and effectively fundraise to help supplement the mission, we talked about what that would look like, some of the parameters that we wanted to establish to make sure that it was a good working agreement for the commission, but also was something that we had high confidence that would be done the right way, and that would leave little scrutiny about how it was handled and how we set that up. And so what I shared with you, after we talked about putting together some type of comprehensive outline or policy around what it would and would not mean, I just shared with you all the purpose and objective of how we wanted something to define the scope of what we wanted to do and how any agreement would be structured, but also set a binding policy for any subsequent community fund agreement that is entered into by the agency. That way they stay on the same types of terms. That way they are all held to the same standard to make sure that we're just working consistently, but also maintaining the integrity of what we wanted to do for that fund. And so really what I shared with you was just defining the terms and reiterating that any donation would be blind, that we would require dual authorization for any disbursement of funds into our account, and making sure that any investment policy was made that was made on behalf of the commission was made with growth potential as the mindset, and also reiterating in policy that no state funds would go into the establishment or the management of this fund, that it would all be from private money. That would make sure that we aren't mixing or commingling any funding, that just to avoid any other scrutiny on that area. And so one thing, just going through the quick overview of what it actually looks like, is it would be called the Kentucky Human Rights Fund, unless that name was in use by another member of a community fund. They would all be donations that are made without any identifying information made to the commission, but the identifying information would be made available to the community fund. And that question was brought up a couple of times about, well, how could people thank donors or sponsors or whatever? Those could be done by the fund, but not from us. The disbursements would be made at any period by the advisors or the designee, which would be the chair or the executive director, both signatures at any time any disbursement is made. Again, no commingling of state funds for the creation or management, and that investments are targeted with providing maximum growth for the commission. And then something that was brought up in conversation, and this is on top of a yearly audit and review of the community fund, but each fund would also be subject to a mandatory evaluation 3 years from the date of establishment. And at that point, the commission can vote to continue, amend, or dissolve that agreement. And also that at any point, the fund agreement may be dissolved or amended by a majority vote of the commission and the director. And so that would obviously be subject to the controlling agreement with that community fund, and just based on if there's some contractual periods where you have to stay. But overall, this would be something that we would use to make sure that if there's anything within that agreement that we find we wish to change at any time, that we would be able to have that conversation and then make those changes at that time. This was finished the revisions on creation on the 15th of this month. And yeah, this is now up for your discussion and consideration. And so if there are any questions, I'm happy to field them now.
Any questions for Terrence on the draft policy? Okay, we now have the draft in front of us. I guess in the discussion back in November, there were two other questions that were to be considered as a part of this process. We talked about a policy document. We talked about reaction from the governor's office and any sense we had in terms of where other legislative bodies may be in terms of us doing this. Any feedback or anything on that yet, Karen?
So I have been reaching out to someone in the governor's office about trying to have this conversation. And one thing was to get a sense of where the budget was going before a definitive I haven't had any negative feedback on it, but I haven't had any, it's been neutral. And so I could also follow up again now that the budgets are out, but there was more concern with getting the budget drafted than this piece, just because there was time. And so I reached out again on, last Thursday. And so I can do that again, but I didn't have any negative feedback on the governor's office on what this would look like.
Any other comments or reaction from commissioners? I guess at least where I am in terms of, I want to proceed to go forward, but now that we have a draft policy, we got something to talk to people in the governor's office and others in a more concrete fashion about what we're talking about planned or what we're talking about putting in place. I think it'd be well served if we shared this with where we're having conversations with to get that. And then, really knowing where the budget process is going and not necessarily putting this out in the public domain to end up being a reason why some in the legislature may say, oh, they're going to go out and raise money.
Yep.
So it's I won't say it's a game, but there's some risk associated with it that we need to work through. But I guess we really need to get a sense on what the reaction is to the policy itself. That's in draft form, and I think once you get that reaction, we can come back and adopt this and move forward, assuming that there's going to be no impact on our budget request. And we got a lot of work to do there.
Thank you. I think that makes sense. I will, now that we have something written, I will circle back on input or reactions to this draft policy. I guess my one question was if there was anything in this draft before it was shared that someone wanted to either, if there are any other questions that might need clarification, or if you all are okay, I am more than happy to reach out again today and share this draft form, and I can let you all know where that goes when I get that feedback on the draft itself. But I also think it's very smart to be cognizant of the budget process and any limits to what we might be appropriated based on projected fundraising. So that's always a risk, and something I do want to make sure that we communicate that for what it's worth, this is something that would be a very long-term investment, and that we definitely would not see millions of dollars come in May. But making that clear, I think, is also important.
Right.
I would also think it would be good, Chair, as you've mentioned, but I don't know what the most appropriate office would be, but if there is a blessing, so to speak, of this, that it be in writing so that we could have something on file that indicates that we have done a due diligence in getting some another opinion. And if ever asked later for whatever reason, we have something in writing, the document.
That's noted, and we'll include that in our step forward. Any other comments or suggestions or reactions?
Can I add one other piece? I spoke to the chair about this, but as we look at the budget push, if anyone wants to discuss lending their voice to how we can push for more funding or protected funding, please let me know. I know that the chair has already agreed to help me go fight in Frankfurt on this, but just if there's anything you all wanted to join in on and making that push, please let me know. I'll be happy for the help. So just putting that out there.
Okay. Any other comments or anything? Okay. And I guess on the committees, we've got two other committees that are out there, and I'm assuming we don't have any reports from those committees today. The bylaws and drawing a blank as to the committee. There are two.
We had bylaws in the community fund.
Right. Okay. Okay. No other committee reports. Let's move to any new business. And I guess on the new business, I would reemphasize what Terrence has already talked about. The budget process is always a rather tedious process in terms of getting there, and you really at the end don't know where you are until really the final days. But again, if you have any relationship with any members of the House and the Senate, I would ask you to speak in favor of, one, restoring the commission's funding back to the previous levels, but also making certain that they understand that the mission of this organization requires full funding of what is needed to in fact implement and make real that mission. And we've got an uphill battle. You know, as Terrence said, the governor's recommendation is very, very favorable to us. The House budget that was put out there actually takes us back and not forward. And we need to talk in favor of what we need to do to make it forward. So I encourage all of you to get engaged in that. And as we work through this process, if there's anything that we need specifically from you, we'll get to you and keep you informed of each step of the process of what's going on. But we cannot continue to sustain ourselves and fulfill the mission with cuts after cuts after cuts, and that's a reality. Okay.
Chair, if I may,
Go ahead.
I'm still grappling on one issue of the executive director's report. If I could circle back to that, and that is the building and the likelihood of the elevator situation really being resolved there. And I just wondered if we as commissioners, if there's something that we should say or do accordingly to the demand that the executive director is putting forth. I would hate for us to invest or go into even entrusting how that the consolidation of the floor would turn out given the issues that we're seeing in other areas of that facility. So looking at ADA requirements and all kinds of other things, I'm still concerned, and I do all I can, Executive Director Sullivan, to support you personally. But I think that, you know, the likelihood of those elevators really being retooled does concern me. So I just kind of wanted to kind of go on record with that I don't want us to be put in a rough situation, consolidating, and then we still run into some problems.
You know, I guess to that point, you know, I can remember prior to the mission being told that the elevators in the building wasn't working, staffing wasn't there, and the elevator was down for a sustained period of time. I still don't know how real properties or the responded to that and what kind of corrective action they took or didn't take or where we went with that. I know that most of that predates you, Terrence, but do you have any idea what was done?
So I don't think Real Properties did much with the owner and manager here on that front. What I can say to looking at consolidation, we are the largest tenant and we do have leverage. And I made it a point to say in any, as demands go, in any extended lease that we have here, I wanted to include a provision about disruption of the elevators as something, as a means to withhold payment, basically like a rent abatement. If there are days, like a prescribed period of time, that we are unable to utilize the full services of the facility, to work that into our agreement, that maybe we don't pay the $7,000 that month. And so just to keep them accountable, because if your largest tenant isn't paying the full amount of what you expect of them, you'll be a little bit more attentive to regular maintenance. And I will say, a couple times when the elevators have had issues, they did bring maintenance within the hour. It's just been a couple of times where they either, when maintenance did come, they couldn't fix it right away or whatever, but just making sure that we have in our agreement that we are very serious about making sure that they are giving regular maintenance and responsive to any issues. I don't think in a building this old, we can expect it to be perfect, but we can demand that it's addressed when there are issues.
Well, the thing for me that I would then say, if we're the largest tenant, should we be on the second and third floor somewhere as opposed to the height of floors in the building? If we're looking at a, any kind of a challenge such that we don't have that threat, it seems like we should be able to claim more prime space at a lower level that's more accessible, and look at that option too. I agree. I don't think it's going to get perfect. And other maintenance issues, we're coming out of a pandemic, I hope, but air purification, any other types of issues that you mentioned, restrooms, these kinds of things have to be acceptable for a state entity to be a tenant. And so I'm becoming more concerned about the future. If we're going to stay at the building, that we be at where we really want it to be if those monies are being expended, and we have the space, and the way the space is configured is appropriate to the mission that we have to carry out. And I appreciate what Dr. Bursch said about growth, because we do have a staffing issue.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just wanted to let you know my heart is with this issue. It's deeper to me. I think that we'd be very concerned about how we are positioned.
I appreciate that sentiment, and I agree with you. We did look at other floor possibilities within the building. And the only ones that make sense are the floors that we have, just because of the spacing out of the other tenants in the building. There might be an office here or there on this floor, an office here or there on that floor, where the cost of doing a completely new floor build out, moving walls, all that good stuff, relocating people that are already there. There aren't really other options besides what we do have. And to be quite honest, we have some of the nicest floors in this building. Our 14th floor is probably, from what I've seen, I haven't been to the top floor. It's a telecommunications place, but from the other floors, it is the nicest floor in this building, the best kept. And we definitely want to utilize that a little bit. And so looking at other spaces within the building is just difficult because of the way that the building is made up. So I will reiterate the commitment to making sure that issues like that, like the elevator and the bathrooms, are addressed. And if they aren't, the best part about this move is it's a lot more cost effective in the short term. And if we do see lack of investment in the building, then that short-term cost, we don't lose that much, and we could always relocate at a different time. And we've made those changes, but we haven't put too much money into it. And so that's part of the consideration when we talked about staying in the building. most of the staff here let me know that they don't want to leave. And they've had good relationships with some of the people in the building, the building manager. Someone let me know about a time that he would walk some of the women to their cars. Just the relationships that they've built here are good, and so they don't want to leave. And so we want to I don't want to disregard the wishes of the people in the office, but we also can look at, and it was more cost effective to look at how we could stay, and we save money by losing this floor, but we also don't spend the money of the move, relocating everybody's stuff. We have storage in the basement. We'd have to rent a new storage facility, figuring out parking, all of those things. The costs just made it make sense right now, following the wishes of the people here, and also looking at the overall costs. We can see what a move is like and what type of responsiveness they give us with a new floor, with our consolidated floor. And we're saving about 40,000 just on the consolidation alone. If at the end of, not the end, but if after trying it and they don't make those adjustments, we haven't expended too much money, and we can then find a new place. And I think there will be more buy-in at that point, because we've given them a chance and they failed to deliver. And I think Brandon wanted to make a point about that as well.
Well, let's hear from Commissioner first, then we can hear from Brandon.
Yeah, I guess I want to first say that I appreciate the budgetary constraints and some of the other aspects that you mentioned, Terrence, but I've got, I guess, one observation and one question. We are the Commission on Human Rights. We lead by example. To what extent are the current facilities accessible to folks with mobility limitations? That's my first question. And when the elevators are not operable, how are we accommodating folks should we have guests that would otherwise need to access things? That is maybe a little less frequent in the current COVID environment, but we have to look beyond that to a time when we can be together in person more often. So if you could help me with those two things, I would appreciate it.
Sure. And we are accessible at the moment. When the elevators are down, we are not, but we do have, and this has been done before, if someone needed to utilize our space, we could meet them in the accessible second floor. And I think that that's part of that conversation with the building, that we have to make sure that we stay accessible. And maybe that even means we have a small space on the lower floor that is open that we can use in the case of an accessibility issue. I can add that to some of the requests that we make, and staying that we have some alternative space that we could use in the event that there is an issue. Hopefully they wouldn't take that as a blanket excuse to then not address the issue. But that is a good point about leading by example. And we do need to make sure that we are accessible and welcoming. And so I can, if it seems appropriate, add that to some of the considerations that we are making in the requests to building management on what we do moving forward. And I don't know if that makes you feel better, Commissioner Cheney or Smith, on if that's something else that we brought up in these conversations.
Honestly, Terrence, marginally. I mean, what we're talking about here is owner deferred maintenance, and we're going into the conversation saying it's okay, and negotiating to a place that we're a place that's less than optimal. So I'm concerned as well.
Can I say one thing as far as the accessibility issue to Commissioner Cheney? I know in enforcement, and I'm sure intake has done the same thing too. We are very aware of people with disabilities and their need for accessible facilities and being able to get to us. So we have, as enforcement officers and intake officers, we've made home calls where we go to people's homes and get things signed if they're homebound. I know we've also walked down to the parking lot. So as far as an enforcement and intake, we really do take accessibility seriously.
Okay, Terrence, you said Brandon had something he wanted to add as well?
Yes.
I've kind of got my finger on the pulse of the elevator situation, so I might comment on that. So the second elevator, they're working on getting parts for it, and due to whatever supply chain issues, they're having difficulty. They switched companies about 18 months ago, and the new company is much more responsive. It's Oracle. So our downtimes have been limited up until the end of December, which it was down for a few days. Now, saying all that, the fact that the protocols we put in place for COVID, as far as working from home, make those limited downtimes insignificant, I would say. And the fact that if we could get a space on the first floor, like Terrence said, that's an excellent idea. So that if the elevators were down, we could still take walk-ins. That I think that would mitigate almost all of the issues. Now, there are other maintenance issues for sure. The HVAC system needs updating, but that's what we are going to deal with as we renegotiate the lease for the 14th floor. So I really think that we can make it work. Accessibility is totally an issue, though. Even if we had a space on the second floor, that's still stairs, so that limits people that if the elevators are down, can't access our facilities. So, but I think that the going forward, the situation will be dealt with to the point where it will be almost unnoticeable. So that's all I have to say. I'm going to comment on that.
Any other comments from any of the commissioners? Okay, and bringing this to conclusion, what I will say is, in my experience with real properties, is that if you don't ask for it and you don't do it up front and you make compromises, you'll never get what you actually need. And if you when you put it in the agreement, they are many times reluctant to enforce it and follow it. So we need to make certain that we at least list what we need and what those expectations are, and they get documented in terms of what's needed. So I would conclude with that. It's an issue and a problem, but something we got to work through. Okay. Any other new business? Okay, hearing none. Our next meeting will be on February the 17th, again at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we will let you know well in advance whether that will be in person or another virtual meeting. I guess really depending on how this virus and the new strand Omicron works in terms of where we are and what we're able to do. Okay. And before we close, Brandon, are you ready? Do you hear me? Or is he transitioning?
Yes, no, I think we're ready. I'm checking right now. Terrence, did she get the key from you?
No.
She needs the master for 16. She should be coming in right now.
What's up?
Well, on behalf of the office, we have this for you. It's a nice plaque for 40 under 40. And a copy of your profile article that appeared in the paper with you. So that's for you. Thanks, boss.
That's really cool. Thank you all. I just knew you needed the key. I didn't know what it was about.
Well, great. I'm glad it worked. Glad it worked. That's just a very small token in terms of how much we appreciate you and celebrating you in terms of the business article and being named among that group. We're pleased and privileged to have you leading this organization, and as commissioners, we want to be supportive on everything that you do. And I know when saying it, not only as a commissioner, but I think it's all of the staff in terms of being supported to make certain of that. So again, belated congratulations on it, and enjoy the framed award.
Thank you all.
Okay. Is there any other item or that any commissioner would like to discuss or bring to the meeting? Hearing none, can I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Jim Glenn, second.
Okay, moved by Commissioner, second by Commissioner Glenn. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? With that, the meeting is adjourned. Look forward to seeing you either in person or in Zoom on February the 17th. And again, if there are any item that you want to make certain is on the agenda or would like to be discussed, please share that with our executive or with me, and we'll make certain it's on there. And again, everybody stay safe, and I appreciate you being here today.